In a realm where gods and goddesses gather, a babbling buffoon announces to the pantheon and declares that the salvation difficulty level is a spine-tingling S-class. Ristarte, the curvy-pervy goddess of healing, known as Rista, gets the daunting task. Once she accomplishes this mission, she'll finally ascend to full-fledged goddess status. But as soon as the ceremony wraps up, Rista dashes frantically to her room as if she saw Zeus naked, unable to believe her luck, feeling like a total loser. She starts pondering her life. She remembers summoning heroes and saving distressed worlds 5 times. Blood is a knockoff Doctor Strange, although veteran gods have saved 10 or even more worlds. She decides to summon a hero from Japan, thinking that since Japanese folks devour that typical isekai shit, they'd get the big picture. She realizes she's been talking to herself like she lost her marbles for a minute and snaps back to reality. She resumes her search for the hero. When she peels it off, she can't believe her eyes. It's Seiya Ryuguin's file, boasting outstanding stats at just level 1. It's like hitting the jackpot. Ecstasy consumes her, and she starts jumping around the room in exhilaration. She's found the perfect hero who can whip Gaia Brande into shape, a fast pass to full goddess status. She summons the hero, and when she lays eyes on him, she's mesmerized by his beauty and aura. Love at first sight. More like love at first body. But she regains her composure, greets Seiya, and tells him he's the chosen one to save Gaia Brande from the demon lord. She tries to set him straight, but he mocks her, saying that if she were an actual goddess, that lazy-ass bitch would save her world herself. She explains the rules, but the cherry Seiya isn't impressed. He asks for special powers or a vote to change the rules, but she shoots him down. His interest plummets. To amuse him and to flex, Rista shows him his impressive stats, and Seiya starts to think her story has some merit. She boasts about his strength, trying to pump him up, but that old soul asks what would happen if he died in that world. Rista reassures him he'll go back home, but he still doubts her. At this point, there's no hope left for him. So she summons a doorway to the other world, but he refuses to risk his life. She tries to convince him she'd be his backup, but he calls that useless, and that makes her furious. Out of the blue, Seiya makes a counteroffer, but he counters the counteroffer by taking off his shirt. Rista's Delulu ass run wild, but alas, he just wants to work out and asks for time to train, just like I said, old soul. Later that day, Rista pays a visit to Ariadoa, the goddess of the seal, and excitedly tells her about their unique, more like sexy hero. She mentions how Seiya has been gym broing in a room next to hers since his arrival, which is somewhat unusual since most heroes can't wait to explore the world. Ariadoa, being wise and all, says that it's fine because Seiya is dealing with an S-level world, so caution is understandable. But Rista thinks he is just nuts, because fighting monsters is the best way for him to level up. Ariadoa advises her not to rush things and urges her to take care of his basic needs and food, something Rista's forgetful head clearly neglected. So she rushes to his side but finds him shirtless again, and she can't help but drool over his abs, wanting to lick his abs. She offers him food, but that dodgy weirdo grows suspicious and asks her to eat it first to confirm it's not poisoned. But that almost made her want to actually kill him, and she snaps at him, telling him it's free of all types of poisons and that hulking won't increase his levels, and leaves after giving him a buzzer to call her. 4 days pass without a single call, and Rista gets worried. She rushes to check on him, finding that the food is gone, meaning the mouse is still in the trap. She decides to wait a bit longer. A week later, the buzzer finally rings, and she runs to his room, finding him fresh out of the shower, which makes her single eyes sparkle. She's brought a thirst trap from Earth instead of a hero. But she quickly gets back on track and asks about his stats. Seiya shows her his stats, and her eyes almost pop out at how much he's leveled up just by working out. He's gained special powers like Hellfire, Atomic Split Splash, and EXP Boost, but he's still unsatisfied. Rista's had enough, so she takes him to Gaia Brande. Rista greets the villagers, but Seiya starts questioning the villagers' identities, making Rista almost explode. At the weapons shop, Seiya, ever cautious, requests 3 armors, driving Rista nuts with his explanations about using them as spares. She realizes she has brought a kid and takes charge and buys him the necessary armor. They visit another shop, where Seiya asks for a massive amount of bombs and antidotal herbs because he's unsure about the monsters they'll face. Rista and the kid from before assuring him that there are only slimes here, which aren't a huge threat, and mocks Seiya for being a scaredy cat. However, in the outskirts, Seiya encounters a slime. Rista explains he could beat it with a club, but Seiya isn't listening. That arrogant twerp goes all out on the slime, using his unique atomic split splash and hellfire skills repeatedly, just to ensure no trace of the slime remains. Just when she thought he was confident to move on to another town, out of nowhere, she gets interrupted by one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon Lord's forces, Chaos Machina, a perverted mastermind. Rista can't believe a Demon King blocks them, but the deadly beauty explains that the Demon Lord sensed the hero's summoning before it even happened. Chaos mentions that the summoning of the hero worried the Demon Lord. After witnessing Seiya's show-off, she realized he possessed great abilities, so she's here to eliminate him, as if he was already not doing enough. Rista quickly tries to scan Chaos's status, but is surprised to find it blank. She tells Seiya to run, but when she looks around, she finds him already sprinting for his life. The selfish moron has left her alone, and she starts running as well, desperate to save herself because clearly she's on her own now. As Seiya battles a hentai demon, he drops more bombs than a reckless internet troll, not caring that some bombs even hit our so-called healing goddess Rista. It's a smoke show, and suddenly, the sex-crazed demon decides to attack. Just when they are about to jump, the demon rushes to grab them, but Seiya is too devoted to get back, so he attacks and traps her, and they leave successfully and land in the divine realm. With Rista on top of Seiya, her heart starts to dance like a stripper, but he throws the trash on the wall. 2 days later, her pervy curiosity gets the best of her, and she decides to use a crystal ball to peek at him. Still, unfortunately, her lecherous desires are shattered by the atrocious demon who announces that she's going to make the town hell and kill everyone unless the heroic duo comes and saves them from their misery. Immediately, Rista tells Seiya about the chaos that Chaos has been causing. Ironic, right? But that heartless jerk feels nothing and asks her to leave him alone to focus on his training. Rista tries to plead with him, but the jerk refuses. Rista assumes he is being unreasonable because of his fear of the demon, but Seiya assures her that is not the case. But the tables do a backflip when he dresses up to go for combat. Rista scans his stats and gets her balls blown when she sees a rapid increase in them along with new skills and levels. Therefore, she quickly tries to open the doorway but gets slam-jacked by Seiya for being dumb enough to walk into hell itself by landing right in the middle. Meanwhile, the bodacious demon is getting impatient and decides to kill the lucky man under her. Still, our hero makes his entrance and shows off his newly acquired skill, Wind Blade, but unfortunately misses the target, giving the demon a reason to roast him, but he snakingly tries to hide his miss by calling it a defense move for the victim. His chivalry makes her more interested in him, and she scans his stats only to find out he is not the man she thought he was. She gets baffled and realizes he is on top of her, her stats given the situation. After looking at her face, Rista pops her chest as flat as cutting board out and boasts like a proud mother in favor of Seiya. But this only worsens things. As a result, when Rista again scans her, she finds her stats boosted in numbers and skills, and she starts to worry about her child. Soon after, the demon attacks one after another, but our skillful hero endures each of them, which annoys the demon, and Rista realizes that his fast reflexes are coming in handy. But the demon decides to show him another hidden skill, the demonic curse, and stabs herself with her sword, making her utterly sexy body deflate, and out comes from it a heinous black monster. Rista trembles after seeing her unbelievably increased stats, but Seiya manages to Iron Man his way out of it by using his strengths which were hidden. After witnessing the miracle, she tries to scan him, but the degenerate goddess is denied access, which makes her lose her tiny mind and realize that he has been faking his skills from the start and is much more powerful than she thought. But the demon pulls out the big guns with her demonic delete attack, and Seiya combines the power of Superman and Thor to wipe her out of existence. However, Rista mentions that she is disappointed in him for hiding his true stats from her. But he explains that he was afraid the enemy would rip open her head to extract information. The Shotacon takes her chance to act all kawaii, but almost gets poked by his sword when suddenly she realizes that the whole village has gathered to thank them. The people offer them stuff to show their gratitude, but the overly cautious hero tells them he has more important things to tend to and goes to gather the demon's charred remains. Rista starts to doubt if he will use his hellfire skill to eliminate them, and unfortunately, he does again multiple times, making everyone a victim. And to make things worse, he uses an advanced skill, Inferno, to eliminate the slightest possibility of regeneration of the demon, but that ends up creating havoc in the down and burning down people's asses for Rista to heal. His actions knock her bottles off, and she screams at him to stop. Afterward, Nina and her dad come to thank them and offer some money. Seiya's greedy side surfaces, asking for more. The kid thinks he's a good guy, but Rista sets her straight, saying he's no Naruto knockoff. The power of friendship fails this time. After their encounter, Rista becomes excited for their next adventure, but being a bummer, Seiya asks her to take him to the divine realm so he can hulk up even further for stronger enemies. Rista tries to convince him that if they don't go to the next town, they won't be able to secure god armor, but Seiya asks her to make some since she's a goddess. But she tells him that isn't possible. He calls her a useless woman with a worth of a medicinal herb. Ouch, and asks the herb woman to take him to the divine realm so that he can train, and maybe she can witness hot, steamy abs once more. After returning to the divine realm, Rista visits Arya and spills tea about Seiya. She tells her that even though that hammerhead has the strength to defeat a heavenly king, all he wants to do is smolder his gains. Arya, in all her busty glory, tells Rista not to fret over his obsession. But her massive melons distract Rista, who can't help but compare her own little chest to those glorious G-cups. Arya, though, doesn't want to be a role model since she messed up protecting one of her worlds. Just then, Seiya burst into the room looking for Rista. Arya lays eyes on him and gets totally mesmerized by the goddessizer. Rista, playing all sinister, pretends to feel sorry for him, hoping to convince him to go on some real adventures. But Arya, with her heavenly knockers, suggests he works out with gods instead, which is way more his style. He agrees, and Rista grabs Arya to make sure it's actually possible. Arya reassures her that with Ishtar's help, it's a go. Finally, Rista asks who Seiya will be training with because they're both delicate little flowers. Arya takes them to meet Cerseus, another gym bro Chad. She asks him if he can train this hot mess of a human, and he agrees. But before he can explain how intense the training is, Seiya, that arrogant shit tells him to shut his filthy mouth and challenge him to a fight. On the first day, Rista checks in with Cerseus at the cafeteria and asks about Seiya's progress. Days go by, and Rista keeps asking Cerseus the same old question, but she gets different and more frustrated answers each time. He says that Seiya is a total demon and a berserker. The guy never sleeps, eats, or does anything except train non-stop. He's exhausted because he wants to become 100 times more powerful, that fucking bastard Beep. Talk of the devil and the devil appeared to drag Cerseus to hell. He tried to make every possible excuse but failed, so he throws his sword into the sea and tells everyone he doesn't wish to see it again. All attempts get washed off when Rista suddenly gets called out by Ishtar and Cerseus's poor soul gets dragged to get whipped. Later, Rista visits Ishtar, and they get into the nitty-gritty of her new hero's antics. Rista tells her about Seiya's chaos in Cerseus, and Ishtar can't help but crack up. After some small talk, Ishtar drops the bomb and tells them to get their butts to another town, ASAP, because the Demon Lord's minions are en route. Rista doesn't second-guess Ishtar's psychic abilities and decides she's gonna drag Seiya along, no matter what, and that allies will be waiting for them in the new town. This gets Rista all pumped up and determined to lend a hand. She rushes off to find Seiya, but catches him red-handed, bullying Cerseus. She tells him about the impending doom, and shockingly he agrees without missing a beat. Fast forward to the town of Simel, where folks are fleeing like they've seen a ghost, or more accurately, undead. Seiya, however, seems clueless, so Rista schools him on the undead deal. They hit up a shop to buy holy water, and Seiya, in his usual over-the-top fashion, demands enough to flood a small city. The priest welcomes them and introduces Elulu and Mash, the Dragon King's descendants. But Seiya, the party pooper, takes matters into his own hands and baptizes the priest with holy water, revealing his true undead form. However, the undead priest wants a piece of the action, but Elulu and Mash step up to the plate. Rista's losing her marbles and wants Seiya to help, but he, the arrogant bastard, refuses because he's already immobilized the enemy. With a flick of his wrist, the enemy crumbles like a soggy cookie, leaving Rista wondering how Seiya sniffed out the phony priest. Seiya, the master of excuses, says the priest would have croaked sooner or later anyway. The priest's noggin starts yapping and threatens them with the 10,000 undead army of Death Magla. But after getting info, Seiya decides to shut him up. Rista knows the drill and goes out before Seiya's elimination attack. Once the smoke clears and everyone regains their senses, Seiya goes on a holy water spree, dousing each person like contestants in a baptism marathon. Conversely, after scanning his allies, he decides he doesn't need them, dragon blood or not. What a piece of work, that guy. Mash, the hero from Nakashi village, tries to rally Seiya's spirits, but Seiya just mocks him and his village, telling him to head back to his Namaste village. In a panic, a group of knights rush over, looking more concerned than a cat at a dog show, and rush towards them and ask the sister about the situation. She tells them that the undead was posing as a priest and brought down the whole church, while the hero, the goddess, and their dragonkin allies saved her and could also save the village. The knights offer their help, but Seiya denies it. He is more interested in the moolah, so he whips out a contract before anything else. Moreover, he advises Mash and Elulu to babysit the knights while he goes off to face the undead army. Mash doesn't listen to him and goes away along with Elulu. He also forbids Rista from tagging along, making her madder than a bull seeing red. She calls him a degenerate, lousy, moth-beep, pig-beep hero, but she wasn't planning to listen. Instead, she summons some divine powers and grows wings, determined to catch up to Seiya. Unfortunately, he is faster than a caffeinated cheetah, and Rista has to use all her heavenly might just to keep up. Seiya finally notices her struggling behind him and decides to show some courtesy, telling her to hold on because they are about to move even faster. But little did she know that his speed was going to burst her goddess asset out from her tiny straps, making them flap in the air like a market banner. When they stop, she starts nagging him for causing her goddess body damage, but Seiya is too invested in the enemy. Moreover, he notices that the enemy is marching in one unit to show off the demon force, which gives him a perfect opportunity to knock them all off in one blow like bowling pins. He summons a meteor strike and sends it hurtling toward the enemy, making it look like they are hosting a fiery barbecue party. Fascinated, Rista asks how he was able to learn such kind of magic, and he reveals that he learned it while training with Cerseus and decided to launch another one just to be safe. Rista, now excited at the prospect of a victorious battle, wonders if the Demon King has been roasted to a crisp. But suddenly, Seiya's dramatic side kicks in and he loses his balance because he has used up a whopping 13,000 MPs out of his original 15,000 talk about being a drama queen. Afterward, Elulu comes to ask for help from them since Mash is nowhere to be found. They go to Seiya's room and find a mess. But it turns out he managed to forge a platinum sword from Rista's hair and his handy tricks in his room. Later, they receive a parcel, and being the mistrustful hero, Seiya asks Rista to open it and finds a mirror in it. She starts posing in front of it when a vision of Mash appears, tied up in the dungeon of the Demon King, Death Magla. He mocks them for failing to get to him, shows them the torture of Mash, threatens to kill him, and provokes Seiya for being helpless. But Seiya shows him who's the boss. He asks Rista to open up a portal to the divine realm, and when she does, he uses his dimension blade sword to cut Death Magla's bony arm via the mirror. Afterward, Seiya quickly pushes Rista into the portal and follows her into the divine realm. With a plan in mind, he rushes to Ishtar unannounced and asks her to find the location of the Demon King. She hesitates, but Seiya makes sure she knows he isn't asking much. Therefore, she finds him the location and opens a portal to get them there. Meanwhile, the Demon King starts screaming by looking at his amputated hand when Death decides to visit him, and the hero-goddess duo appears before him. Seiya instantly unleashes Hell's fire on him, whereas Rista rushes to heal Mash. As a result, the Demon King creates a blue flame boundary that protects him and unleashes his invincible monster, Dark Fyrus, on which every attack of Seiya fails. Turns out the monster has an elemental weakness to ice magic. The Demon King's version of a How to Beat Me pamphlet. The Demon King brags about his creation, unknowingly giving Seiya the key to victory. Seiya's brain processes the information faster than a squirrel storing nuts for the winter, and he uses the tactics against the monster, leaving the Demon King flabbergasted. The Demon King couldn't resist asking how Seiya acquired such skills. Seiya casually reveals that he had considered every possible scenario and trained himself for everything. After freezing the monster with his custom-curated bracelet, Seiya decides to add the cherry on top by poking his sword through its chest and using his phoenix thrust to shatter it into pieces. Now, the only thing left is to do the usual Seiya cleanup. Rista and Mash make their way out while Seiya breaks all hell loose on the Demon King. Back at the village inn, Mash finally regains consciousness, and Seiya wastes no time making them his baggage carriers, even though this seems to uplift their spirits. Since they are aware of Seiya's great powers, Mash asks him to be his underling, and Seiya accepts as long as they agree to be his labors. Furthermore, Mash tells him about the Dragon Den, where he will be granted the mightiest weapon to defeat evil. Seiya is delighted by the thought, but his old soul starts to wonder if it's even necessary. Rista, for the sake of her adrenaline, convinces Seiya to visit it. Rista takes them to find Cerseus in the cafeteria, his usual spot, but doesn't seem to find him there when suddenly he appears in the kitchen with a dilly-dally and a cake. The wet pussy offers Seiya his cake, but he gets disguised by it and breaks his delicate heart. Seiya tells him that he needs to train Mash and breaks his delicate heart. Seiya tells him that he needs to train Mash. After listening to him, he agrees to train someone with a low rank as it would not hurt his self-esteem and his body. After putting Mash in his place, they move to find the fire goddess, Hestiaka, a smoking hot beauty indeed. They entrust her with training Alulu. After pawning off their kids for babysitting, Seiya tells Rista he needs to find a trainer for himself, but Rista is the one who gets lucky and bumps into Valkyrie's heavenly busts. But the goddess is not that heavenly, and she chokes Rista for bumping into her and threatens to rub her out. Moreover, she starts mocking her for being made in charge of an S-level world. And to make things more fun, she grabs her milkers in hopes of milking them out and later leaves her by spanking her. However, Seiya tells her that he sensed tremendous power from that exhibitionist and immediately goes to her to ask her to train him. He almost gets his ass beaten, but Arya arrives at the right time and saves him in return for her bazongas to be fondled. Afterward, she takes her to the goddess of war, Adenella, and asks her to train him. Her creepy eyes scan him, and she accepts the offer, hoping to explore his limits. On the first training day, Rista visits Mash and finds peace there. Later, she visits Seiya and asks Adenella about his progress. But something smells funny. Her behavior has changed, and she seems normal. Subsequently, she sees them again the next day, but finds them in the cafeteria, where Seiya feeds bullshit about cautionism in Mash's head. Later that day, she finds Adelina acting suspicious and out of her element, talking about Seiya in a romantic tone. On the final day, when everyone seems to have leveled up except Ilulu, her trainer advises Rista to lose hope for her since she has no talent. However, Seiya, the goddess Sizer, manages to make her trainer fall in love with him and transform her into a pretty girl and, as a token of her love, offers him cake by which Seiya gets disguised and leaves her yearning for his love. On their way to misfortune, they follow them and get attacked by the monster, but Seiya's automatic phoenix knocks them all down, making the others feel useless. The pushover goddess tries to scan him to see how he acquired such skill, but almost gets blind. Soon, Mash and Ilulu signal their arrival at the den. When they enter, they find a seal that could only be broken by Mash and Ilulu, but our show-stealer hero breaks the seal and tramples on their hope of being useful. There they find a portal, so Seiya decides to check it, and after confirmation they get teleported to the dragon world, where Lagos greets them and takes them to their leader, Levi. She calls Mash and gives him the power to transform himself into a dragon, but instead asks something breathtaking, literally from Ilulu, her life. The leader shamelessly asks for Ilulu's sacrifice to forge Ixasian, a sword that could kill the demon lord. Although the treacherous demands make everyone lose their minds, the fact that the demon lord already controlled 70% of the world made them hold their horses. Afterward, the town's leader arranges a celebration for them and decides that Ilulu will be sacrificed at the celebration. Later at the ceremony, the town's lizards serve them food and drinks when suddenly the lights go out, and Ilulu enters the room, ready to be sacrificed in the dragon abyss. Before jumping, she looks one last time at her friends, but Levi becomes impatient and orders the guard to push her to her death. But Seiya leaps forward to knock the Hulk knockoffs to save his precious baggage carrier. However, his actions cause chaos among the people who despise him for going against the legend. But Seiya regards the legend as the nattering of an old lizard crone. Rista and Mash try to help but get knocked down with crooked legs like a dead spider on the ground. Still, Seiya manages to save himself since he doesn't trust anything made by lizards and fires a cringe pickup line by saying he only trusts Rista's food. Unfortunately, the heroic spotlight gets broken when the leader transforms into an even uglier dragon and starts yapping about her mightiness when the dubious Seiya takes a dragon sword from his bag to fight her, which he made by synthesizing. He launches his attack, which brings down the dragon's HPs. Rista tries to stop the dragon from striking back by saying she'd kill Ilulu at this point, but the heartless wench explains that they only need her blood and flesh for the sword to be made. And when everything fails, she snakingly activates her death sentence necklace on Ilulu's neck to kill her. But not today. Seiya launches a fire attack on her to make mincemeat, causing her stats to even lower down. Intimidated by his attacks, the dragon decides to activate her ultimate protection skill, but even that almost gets knocked down by Seiya. Moreover, just to prove that the zombie has a beating heart, he gives her a last chance and asks the dragon to lift Ilulu's curse, but she refuses and manages to trick him once again. But Seiya has had enough and pushes her into the abyss. Ultimately, the necklace gets deactivated, and a sword gets forged by her flesh. Seiya grabs the sword and cuts Ilulu's arm to mix it with blood, and proving that the sword has now transformed into exhasion. To ease their doubts, Seiya manipulates Lagos into thinking that the situation is a win-win even after losing their leader. They manage to forge the exhasion sword from the abyss, and Levi's sacrifice was what she wished for. Afterward, when they return to their world, they find Ilulu and Mash all lovey-dovey. Rista requests some privacy and asks Seiya about the sword being fake, and he agrees to her suspicion, but tells her not to tell anyone. On their way out, Rista gets anxious thinking about the reckless decision of the ever-cautious Seiya. Later, they encounter the group of knights waiting for them at the den's entrance with bad news.